Good morning. Recently, somebody posted a question on social media asking if they should prioritize Dharma practice or taking care of body and mind. And I actually didn't read the responses particularly, but I thought the answer was, or an answer was pretty straightforward, which is that caring for this body-mind appropriately is Dharma study. So there's no conflict there at all. I think the person who was asking was perhaps encountering some difficulty in practice. Sometimes people will try to manage a strict schedule of one kind or another, and they won't be getting enough sleep and so forth. And that usually proves not to be helpful. An exception might be if you're in a monastic environment where the training is pretty carefully supported by the way things are set up. Then it's possible to experiment with quite a bit less sleep and maybe a more restricted diet without harm. But when that's not possible, then experimentation like that should be set aside. And one should look after this body-mind very carefully and do what's necessary to preserve this remarkable opportunity to inhabit a realm where the chances are good that one can encounter Buddha Dharma and engage in the study thereof. Otherwise, if we're not caring adequately for this gift we've received, then it tends to mean that we don't recognize how precious it is. These days, my brother, who is my only living family, is quite unwell, and largely as a result of not paying attention to care that needed to be taken. And it's a difficult price to pay. So there's no way that Shakyamuni Buddha or any of the other Buddhas and ancestors would require such a thing. So diet and sleep and maintaining a healthy diet and whenever possible receiving adequate health care and dental care and so forth, this is what should be done. and there is no conflict at all. And one should not bother fretting too much about, well, maybe I should be on a lengthy retreat instead. When we have the strength and stability, then maybe that's a good time to do retreat. But not in such a way that we disregard this being. From a traditionalist viewpoint, one might say, well, what about our attachment to this body-mind? Well, if one is wholeheartedly engaged in Dharma study, there will be limitless opportunities to examine that attachment. And to study carefully the way that our ingrained assumptions about this body-mind contribute to the habits of attachment. All day, every day, there's plenty there to see. And meanwhile, sitting in stillness, the remarkable nature of the body-mind reveals itself over and over. And that's the basis of our instruction to follow the stream to the source, as we said over and over. And watch the clouds pile up. There's no way to adopt and care for that practice consistently that will not loosen our grasp on the illusory presence of a perpetual being or person. That loosening has to happen. No need to force it or pursue it. Just watch. And sometimes you hear, let the correct view come to establish itself. The correct view being that whatever is here, it is not a perpetual entity. And as attachment decreases, suffering decreases, well-being increases, which is exactly what Shakyamuni Buddha prescribed. And our tendency to become involved in the committing of, well, I guess one could say evil deeds, becomes less and less. Evil, as you probably realize, does not have the same kind of moral framework as is perceived in, say, the Abrahamic faiths, where evil is, well, it's some kind of a force, depending on which faith you're speaking from. And sometimes it gets personified as a being, like, you know, the devil or something. I would say in Buddha Dharma, evil is most easily equated with harming others, and could be summed up as the human habit of hurting and taking advantage of other beings. There's no need to imagine a pervasive dark force in the universe. Some people look at, you know, certain persons or certain events and think they see that dark force, but all I see is a lot of very bad behavior. So from that point of view, the way that Buddha Dharma handles this issue of so-called theodicy is very different from, for instance, the faiths in which a lot of us grew up. Our founder of the practice community in San Francisco, Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, had this very, very practical and simple understanding of what constitutes a good behavior. And basically, he said, we pretty much know, you know, apart from some relatively unusual, very complicated circumstances, we pretty much know what to do. And if we find ourselves inclined in the opposite direction, he said, don't contemplate good and evil. Just think, don't do it. This is as handy a summation of the practice of the precepts as I've ever heard. Actually, he didn't say don't do it. He used one of his charming sort of semi-Japanese circumlocutions where he said, not to do. Don't think evil, just not to do. And this locates the problem of good and evil exactly where it belongs, which is here, in the human heart. And the tendency in certain other faiths to project that out into the world and give it, you know, wings and a tail is not very hopeful, I don't see. No, I wasn't, as far as I know, around in the early centuries of the Common Era, practicing out in the desert with other monastics, or maybe I was and I just don't remember. But back then, the tendency was to maintain, you know, first of all, spend much time in solitude and engage in homely pursuits like making straw sandals. Interestingly, they did that in China too. And watch very carefully for the arising of evil thoughts. And defeat them utterly. And when the devil comes to visit you, bring to bear the full power of prayer and evoke the presence of Jesus and angels and so forth. And today, there are still folks who regard that as their main, to use the old Greek word askesis, their main training, is to be on the lookout for evil influences which are trying to get at you. So I think I mentioned before, it was an interesting chap, an Episcopal clergyman, young guy who went traveling around here and there, visiting various spiritual enclaves around the world, and spent some time in the Middle East at the monastery of St. Catherine. It was very famous. Old Christian community. And he spent some time hanging out with a hermit who lives there, who's also pretty well known, who lives not in the monastery, but in a cave nearby. And who spoke in this fashion, you know, devils and evil influences. And so they found a little cave retreat place for this this Episcopal clergyman, and he filmed a lot of his time there. And after spending a while with this famous hermit, the next thing you know, it's nighttime, and he's in his own cave there, and it's very windy outside. There's a lot of wind noise, and I think there's some I don't know, wild dogs or something, or hyenas or whatever they are, yapping, and he says, now I know what the hermit means. I can sense the devil approaching and trying to get at me. I did not think that was very helpful for his practice life, to have notions like that. Why not just listen to the wind? Sit in stillness. It's hard to see what kind of trouble you can get into sitting all by yourself in a cave. The likelihood of your hurting anyone else is pretty slim. And hopefully, if you're inclined to hurting yourself, one of your brethren or sistren will notice that and say, cut that out, that's just stupid. So in the practice of Buddha Dharma, sitting around waiting for devils to show up so you can do battle with them, it's not really part of it. And people say, what about Shakyamuni's battle with Mara? Well, if you read that story, it's quite different. Not only that, over the centuries, there have been some rather sympathetic treatments of poor Mara. who gets beaten up on a lot. And Mara, of course, basically Mara's influence is purely illusory. The temptation to see what is in constant flux as solid and graspable, that's Mara's influence. There's nothing devilish about it at all. The tendency to see our human life as perfectly controllable and tunable so that, what do we say, a kind of more or less a perpetual state of happiness can be arrived at. This, of course, is not possible. Happiness, like everything else, ebbs and flows. So it's kind of breathtaking the way that, especially in some of the later developments in Buddha Dharma, there's a kind of breathtaking way in which the teaching comes along and just sweeps everything aside. I ran across a quote from the sutra known as the teaching of Vimalakirti. And Vimalakirti asks Manjushri, with whom he's having a chat, what is the Bodhisattva's doorway of non-duality? Manjushri says, well, as I see it, there are no words, there's no teaching, there's no omniscience, there's no knowing all things. There are no questions and no answers. And then he says something very peculiar. He says, how thick the skin of the face is. That's my view, says Manjushri. And I think Vimalakirti says, yeah, all right. This is called the gateway of non-duality. And that remark about the skin of the face crops up in some other places too, and it's a remark that sometimes gets bandied back and forth in our Chan and Zen campfire stories. Dogen uses it. They'll say things like, is the skin of the face a foot thick or an inch thin? So I don't pretend to know exactly what that means, but my sense is the skin of the face refers to the way we wrap our actual experience with a convincing picture that we carry around with us and show ourselves and others. So it's like a mask. And how thick that can get, you know? The gateway of non-duality, though, goes right through. No words, no teaching, no question answer. Just as Dogen says elsewhere, a landscape of drifting clouds for mile after mile after mile. And that insight comes right from Dogen's practice of just sitting. Which is, of course, the embodiment of the gate of non-duality. So remember, this study that we do is incomparably precious and includes caring for ourselves appropriately. Please remember that. And even though I said gate of non-duality has no questions and no answers, we always leave some time for questions and answers after a Dharma talk. So please, if you have anything to ask or to say, please do so. Yes, Kato-san.
I have noticed, as the years go on, when I watch entertainment or such, I am a lot more attracted to a story that does not make the villain like pure evil. Like it has some sort of sympathetic treatment that you can actually relate to. And I remember our new allies, the Taliban, when they blew up the Buddha statues or carvings in the cliff wall. I remember reading somewhere that one of them had said, this is what you people cared about. You don't care, they're starving. We have nothing. So we destroyed it. And I remember having a lot of, because I was so disgusted when it happened, felt so sad about it, but then I remember feeling sort of like, we turned, I guess that evil thing is just us versus them. Like they were not being attended to, they were not being nourished. And we were separating, and so they took kind of a similar, more extreme action instead of just nourishing each other and taking care of each other, and this constant, even in our own country, this constant us and them thing, it just seems to get worse. That's what feels like evil is to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this,
Yeah.
and I'm just observing that more and more, they just don't have much stomach for it anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe it's simple because it's black and white. I don't know.
Well, it generally is fairly simple. We are capable of complicating things enormously, but it's not necessary. There's that old saying, you know, almost everything you need to know you learned in kindergarten. That's pretty close to true. Most of the time, if it's possible to share what you have rather than hit someone else over the head, probably better to share. There's nothing so complicated about that. And some might say, oh, but what about when there's not enough to go around and it's either you or them? It's like, well, most of us won't have to face that. And when we do, see if you can just tell, well, what's the right thing to do in this instance? They say, usually pretty clear. Anything else?
Aaron, raising her hand.
Aaron? Yes? Aaron, unmute yourself if you want to ask a question.
Hello, Roshi.
Hi there.
You know, I'm not very good at asking questions after Dharma talks.
Okay. I see you have a four-legged friend, is that right?
Yeah, there's 3 cats living here.
Oh, lucky you.
Very lucky. Great talk, Roshi.
How are you getting along?
I'm doing quite well. I mean, I started my new job, so it's a lot of responsibility I'm taking on. So I'm adjusting to that.
Good for you.
And I moved. I'm enjoying my new location. It's good.
Very good.
I'm mostly quite good.
All right.
How are you doing?
Oh, I'm okay. I'm getting old.
Yes.
Just like Buddha said, watch out for that.
Did he say that?
He did.
I'm getting older too.
Yeah, you got a long way to go yet.
Fair. I feel older than I was last time you saw me in person.
Yeah. That's how it works. Well, maybe that'll do for now. Oh, sorry.
Reverend Myō?
Ron-san, do you have a question or comment?
Well, yes, thank you. Yes, and hi, Aaron. Don't get any don't get any older if you can avoid it.
Hi.
Hi, nice to see you. Question for the Reverend. Could you expand a little bit on that statement? Non-duality has no questions and no answers.
Are you serious? Is this a trick question? Come on now.
Yes and no.
Well, I'll just say to expand would possibly be to point away from the gate. So I'd rather not do that.
I suppose that will do.
Maybe for now, huh? Aaron has a cat that is appearing on the screen. Hello there, whatever your name is. Hello, kitty. On that excellent note, thank you very much.